How are you?
Very good. It's been an eventful day with a lot of eventful things going on, but getting through the day.
Good, good. It's been a busy one for me too, but I think we're going to have fun now, and that's going to be very good. Let me just turn my phone off. And I think people are joining. Welcome,
Indeed.
welcome. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being with us. Welcome. We'll start on the hour. Sorry. Bottom of the hour. Yes. So, in the meantime, what do you think, Shil?
Yeah, it's good.
It's good,
okay.
huh?
Yes.
She's looking good.
She looks great.
Yes.
Jill, you had no option but to say that.
I always choose my own options and I meet them.
Yeah, but I always like to have his opinion on that one.
It's a lovely painting you have behind you, Nadia.
Oh, thank you. That's from an artist in Benin. His name is Midi.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, contemporary art in Africa is booming at the moment, and we have a lot of talent there. So every time we can, we get something to, to complement the collection.
Fantastic. I did notice that Gilles is a art collector from his profile, so interesting indeed.
Yes, we're passionate about art, particularly, I mean, both the traditional and the contemporary one.
Yeah, yeah.
Paintings mostly, but also sculpture, actually. Yeah.
Hence your extensive traveling around it as well.
Yes, yes. Well, that helps. You know, every time we get somewhere, we try to meet artists, go to galleries, see what's trending. And I have to say, we're lucky enough to have a lot of friends among, artists among our friends and collectors as well. So it does help. It does help. So yeah, art is really, I mean, now it's an asset. That's actually what.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely right. And I think, one of the things that as we moved into our new house in the last couple of years, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but went through the sort of concept of building from scratch. One of the things that we've done is divide the house into two parts. So the back end is extremely contemporary and filled with modern art, and the front end is actually filled with quite traditional art, which is really nice because it's a real reflection of who we are as well.
Yes, and it is very important that your art reflects who you are.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, you live with it. It's not just an investment. So it's really, really important to have that happen. Yeah, so, and how's the family? Everyone's fine?
Everyone's good. My 4-year-old UV wanted to come and join the video, and I said to him, I'm not sure Nadia will be impressed with that at this stage. We might have to do that another time. So
well, I think he would take over.
He would take over, absolutely. He got very excited as he came upstairs and saw the tripod set up. So he definitely wanted to be a part, and then he decided that actually macaroni cheese was awaiting and decided to go downstairs.
Yeah, I think macaroni and cheese is way more interesting. But that's great. Welcome, welcome. I see lots of people joining. This is really wonderful. So I'm wishing you a welcome from Acosphere. Thank you for being with us every week. And if you're new to our Insta Live, interviews, well, we are sure you're going to enjoy our guest. Today we are here with another amazing guest. Yes, we do promise you every week to have an amazing guest, and we deliver. That is because there are so many wonderful profiles out there, incredible stories to tell, and our Instagram Live is there just to share with you those stories. So welcome and stay with us through the half hour. You will learn a lot, I'm sure, through this interview. Today we are welcoming Nishma Gosrani, who is a Londoner, Kenyan-born Londoner, and I'm sure she's going to tell us all about the incredible things that she has achieved through the year. I think we can start. 2 more minutes? 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes.
What do you think, Jill?
Yeah, people come on time.
People come on time. So we'll give them another minute, and then we will get started. Valerie, hello. Welcome. Valerie is one of our previous speakers, and she just joined from New York. That's awesome. I see new names. Welcome, welcome. We're happy to have you on our Instagram Live today. So today we welcome Nishma Gosrani, who has been invested with an OBE in the Queen's New Year 2020 on the honors list for promoting diversity and inclusion in all aspects of British life. Nishma has pioneered gender pay gap reporting and the subsequent changes to the Equality Act. She also her address was titled Equality Matters on International Women's Day in 2016 and led to a rare standing ovation from the public gallery at the House of Commons. She's based in London and she's a director at Deloitte Consulting and leads people transformation in banking, capital markets, and asset management, with a key focus on partnering with clients on the future of work agenda. She sponsors the Deloitte Multicultural Network, which won Employee Network of the Year at the BITC Award in 2015. Since 2011, Nishma Gosrani has been a board member and a trustee of Tamasha Theatre Company, a leading theatre company which champions BAME artists from culturally diverse backgrounds. Nishma has also recently been appointed as a governor and trustee of St. Albans High School for Girls, where she will be responsible for promoting STEM. In 2007, Nishma Gosrani won the Asian Professional of the Year Award at the Asian Achievers Award. And on the occasion of her OBE, Nishma said, "I am deeply humbled to have been invested as an officer of the most excellent order of the British Empire. It is a great honor to be recognized for something I am passionate about. It leads to more innovation, greater opportunities for all, as well as better access to talent and improved business performance." Nishma Gosrani, welcome to the Acosphere Instagram Live.
Thank you, Nadia. It's an absolute pleasure to be here on Thursday afternoon.
Wonderful. We're going to have a great time. So let me get started. You are a director at Deloitte Consulting, a gender pay gap advocate, a diversity and inclusion champion. What is your story?
That's a big question, Nadia. It's not it wasn't actually a structured story. I fell into consulting, and my love for consulting grew as I started with Deloitte at the time, actually, but then I did leave the firm as a consultant, and through my graduate years really fell in love with it. I actually wanted to join the Foreign Office, and got rejected by the Foreign Office at the time, and as you will know, even now there are very few women, let alone people of colour, within the Foreign Office, although I don't hold that against them at all. And I joined what was Deloitte, or Arthur Andersen actually at the time, known as one of the Big Five. And have pursued my career in consulting, so 17 years of financial services consulting. And I have to say, I wake up every day still loving what I do, and I'm extremely passionate about it. Um, I had the very big fortune of, through, not actually through my career, but a slight divergence as I moved between two organisations, to meet the incredible Maria Miller, who was, as many of you will remember, the Minister for Women and Equalities in David Cameron's cabinet. And her and I talked for a long time at the World Economic Forum about gender pay gap reporting. And you know, as a consultant in financial services, I know very much that if you want organizations to oblige, you have to have measurable targets in order for any dial to move. And when I joined consulting or professional services 17 years ago, 15% of the graduate intake were women. And actually, whilst that dial has moved significantly to about 50% today, what hasn't changed at all are the number of female directors and partners coming through the professional services firm. There has been a slight change in that dial, but really doesn't compensate for 17 years of people trying. And so one of my reasons for advocating gender pay gap reporting was that measurable targets make organisations accountable and responsible in the public domain for how they move the agenda. And what the calculations around gender pay gap does is actually put out there the stark differences in leadership, and really the numbers between men and women at senior levels. So it really, in true consulting style, was a concept and a conceptual idea that that I pulled together. And here we are, you know, a number of years later, something that organisations now, from a mandatory governmental perspective, regulatory perspective, have to report on. And so I'm delighted that the agenda has moved on in the way that it has. What we've also tried to do over the last couple of years is introduce ethnicity pay gap reporting in exactly the same format. And a bill was passed in January of this year on that, but unfortunately was unsuccessful. What has been successful in the last 3 or 4 weeks on the back of Black Lives Matter and the social crisis that we find ourselves in across the world is that Boris Johnson has decided that that is now back on the table, and a petition was signed recently to enable that movement to go forward, which again is much needed in the country. And of course, the fact that I got an OBE was just the icing on the cake and a true highlight of my career to date, but something that doesn't really stop me from moving forward. If anything, it makes me even more passionate about moving the concept of gender equality or ethnicity inequality to equity, because one of the things I found through research is that equity is the problem, not equality.
That's right. I really like that. I really like the difference between equality and equity, because that's where the problem lies.
Absolutely, and I think that, you know, if you just read the press today, we're looking at a lot of internships that have been cancelled by organisations as a result of the fact that we're not in offices, and COVID-19 doesn't enable the sort of supervision that's required on an internship. But what organisations are doing are offering free internships on a virtual basis. The problem with that, from a socioeconomic perspective, is that whilst it gives a generation of individuals an opportunity to do something with their summer, for those who can't afford to go on an internship that's completely free to see themselves through their final years at university, makes it extremely difficult. And one of my bugbears, or actually much more than that, with the current crisis is that not only are we going to see a generation of individuals out of work as a result of graduates not being hired in September or January of this year, but we're also going to see a number of those that are homeschooled and those from privileged backgrounds in a much better position as a result of access to resources. And I know that the government are trying to address that, but there is no doubt going to be a shortfall.
So inequalities are going to increase.
Indeed, across the world.
And of course, those who are already under the radar are going to be even more heavily impacted.
Yes, and I think those from a BME community in particular are going to find themselves in a situation where the impact of this is going to be greater, as we saw in 2007 and 8 on the back end of the financial crisis in the Western world, where there was a huge dynamic around employment. And unfortunately, diversity and inclusion dropped to the bottom of executives' agendas as they were trying to survive through the crisis. What we have here is, and a much used word, not only this unprecedented crisis from an economic and financial standpoint, but we're looking at something that is much wider and bigger than that. You know, we have a health crisis, and over and above that, we have a social crisis across the world as well. And governments and large organizations are trying to pick all of that up. And whilst I hope that the great work that has been done through diversity initiatives over the course of the last 10 years doesn't drop to the bottom of that agenda, it is very likely to happen. And I think we all have a role to play, despite where you are in the spectrum of your careers, to ensure that all that hard work doesn't go down the drain.
Thank you, Nishma. That's really, really interesting. I'm going to move on slightly just to ask you if you could kindly share with us any anecdotes related to the challenges and the opportunities you had to face in your career and in your multiple activities.
So I and unashamedly, Nadia, have had a very sort of, I guess, a privileged start to my career, and a privileged start through having attended one of the best universities in the country, but also having been public schooled. But however, when you get to the workplace and it's an equal platform for everybody, one of the things that you realize that hasn't made you realize so much in the early parts of your career, or perhaps even through school and university, is that you very apparently become a woman, and you very apparently in the boardroom or otherwise become a person of color. And irrespective of working for a diverse organization in financial services, and irrespective of having very diverse clients, there were some very interesting anecdotes from early on in my career where more often than not I would walk into a room as the consultant due to lead a discussion at one of the major banks, and there would be an assumption that I would be there to serve the coffee or the tea. And I used to find that irritating to no end. And eventually I had plucked up the courage to have a conversation with one of my mentors about this. And it was a very, very sound piece of advice that he gave me. And he said to me, as you roll into the room and you sit down, almost instantaneously, the first thing that you should do is to pull out your business card and hand it over just in the beautiful way that the Japanese do, because it will stop that sort of reaction coming from the other side of the room. And that piece of advice has stayed with me for a long time. And I have shared that advice actually with members of my team who even today come to me with very similar stories. But I mean, Nadia, I could share hundreds of anecdotes with you, and we would be here for another couple of hours. But really, happy to come back on that as we move on.
Thank you very much. This is, I guess I'll call it the story of our lives, right?
Indeed.
It's unbelievable, but it still happens today. So you have won many awards, Nishma, and you've been invested with an OBE, as we mentioned, for your work on diversity and gender. Can you tell us more about the experience and what really fuels your passion? I know you have started on it, but I want to get more.
Sure, Nadia. I mean, I think, as I mentioned earlier, and I'll delve into more detail now, winning awards is fantastic recognition, but it's not the end, and it never has been the end for me. What it has given me is a fantastic platform to build relationships far and outside of my client portfolio, or perhaps one would call my work portfolio. And as many will have gathered, I have a deep and keen interest in politics and a keen interest in what the government does. And what it has done is given me access. And I think access is incredibly important. One of the things that I have never been afraid to do is ask for help. And as I have gone through my journey, parallel journeys, I would say, I've almost had an internal profile from a work perspective and then an external profile side by side. On both levels, there has never been a fear of asking for help. But what I've also had are some incredible mentors on that journey. But even more important than mentors, sponsors. And I think that that has been a key for me in terms of how I open doors. And there have been people that, and I look at those two very differently and very separately. And I think it's really important that people listening to this think about sponsorship and mentorship as two very distinctly different things. So a mentor, in my view, is somebody that you can, that you trust, is an advisor, shares their own personal experiences with you and helps you navigate. A sponsor is somebody that believes in you, picks you up, and puts you in a position that's uncomfortable, puts you in a position that enables challenge, puts you in a position that and gives you an opportunity that you wouldn't have otherwise had. And what I'm very conscious of doing myself today is when I have a number of mentors and a number of sponsors, is being very, very clear about the difference in those two particular areas. And I have had a number of people and very learned individuals, very intellectual individuals, and friends and family that have wholeheartedly supported me. And I think that has been one of the key reasons for some of what I have been able to do in my career to date. And I have to say that as a working mother, and the stigma that goes around some of that as well, and the guilt that comes out of being a working mother is not easy to grapple with, and all of the sort of layers that we add on of being somebody of colour and coming from a conservative Indian background is something that you grapple with on a day-to-day basis. And I continue to do, Nadia, to the day. You know, every single time my son says to me, "Mummy, do you have to go to work today?" The guilt is there, and on the other end it's there as well. So, you know, that doesn't change at all, but it's being very confident in your own skin about what you believe is right for your life. And I strongly believe that, you know, there are honours, there are awards, there's recognition, and I've been very, very fortunate. But what I also believe is that how do we pass that on to the next generation?
Yes.
And how do we make sure that they don't trip up on some of the learnings or experiences that I have had through my career?
So is this why you promote girls in STEM?
That is one of my passions, and what I find is that, and having been governor at St Albans Girls' School, which many of you may or may not know is an independent girls' school based in Hertfordshire. I have no specific links to the school. I didn't go to the school. I have a son, as I've mentioned, so he's definitely not going to the school. But it's a phenomenal institution in the way that it approaches trusteeship and governorship. And one of the things it's looking at fundamentally as part of the Girls' Day Trust in the UK is the lack of girls and women, particularly from a BME background, entering using STEM subjects to enter the workforce, in essence. And there is a very small minority that go and do that. So engineering, technology, they still sit around the outskirts of what is perceived to be the right career choice for women or for girls. And it's very interesting because if I look at my own ethnicity in the mix, there is still very much the concept of the best thing that you could go and do if you were to be successful, or success is ridden on being a lawyer, an accountant, a doctor. And so many years on, that concept hasn't changed. And I still remember when I spoke to my family 17 years ago about joining as a management consultant. What does that mean? What's a management consultant? You know, is it going to give you the success, the titles, the money, etc.? And only until it was associated with an accounting firm was it accepted. And I think that that stigma is still very much there. Now, I think we have a lot of work to do to ensure that technology, which is obviously key to the future of work, an agenda that I'm hugely passionate about in the workplace, and is going to be, and we've seen from the fact that we are all now remote working, we are having to think about our own future and our careers in a very different fashion, that STEM becomes even more important. And we need to ensure that parents are equipped to be able to have that conversation with their children in terms of the subjects that they select to prepare for the future. Or again, we're going to see another generation not having skills in those particular areas. But it makes economic sense. You know, we have seen Rishi Sunak, our Chancellor, talk about the Kickstarter scheme as part of his agenda to get the economy going again. And a key element of the apprentice scheme within that is going to be encouraging people to take on roles within engineering and to ensure that our manufacturing industry is still pumping and still moving. And I think that we will have a part to play as part of that. So I shall certainly be encouraging my son to think about STEM subjects, but I should also point out that on my role as a parent of going to a number of the leading prep schools in the country to visit them, what I was shocked about was that IT is still seen as a very separate subject as part of a curriculum rather than it being embedded into every subject. And so the education sector as a whole has a whole lot more work to do.
To adapt. No, I totally agree
Indeed.
with you. Now, how are girls from African or Asian background doing compared to Caucasians in terms of the STEMs in the UK?
So I briefly touched on that subject. I think the difficulty with some of that at the moment, Nadia, is we don't have all of the statistics available to us, and we've been looking at and data, you know, on all fronts of what I've just talked about today is an issue, because if you don't get accurate data, you're not able to manipulate that data to provide the right guidance and evidence to put forward. And we don't. What a lot of parents choose to do is not declare the ethnicity of their child at school, in the same way that around the ethnicity pay gap, we're seeing about 80% of the workforce declaring their ethnicity, which makes situations like the ethnicity pay gap reporting quite difficult or not as accurate as one would like. So to answer your question, based on the evidence or data that is presented in front of us, we know that less and a large proportion of those from Asian or minority backgrounds take on STEM subjects compared to their white counterparts, and particularly their white male counterparts. And of course, that then filters through into the workforce as well.
Right. Thank you, Nishma. I'm going to say, you know, you are an international public speaker. I know you don't think of yourself as one. We've had that conversation before, but you are an international public speaker. You travel around the world, you speak. So as an international public speaker, where do you find the courage, the confidence to stand there and get people to listen to you and hear what you have to say?
That's a very kind comment, Nadia. I'm not quite sure what an international public speaker is in the virtual world today, and I think almost any public speaker could be an international public speaker to that end. I have, and it comes back to opportunity and it comes back to access. So in my very early days, actually through university and through representation on a number of different areas, I've had the real opportunity to express myself through passion. And what I have done is think about what I want to say in 3 different ways, and I never ever used a script, and much to my it is often a great thing not to have a speech, because people know you're speaking from the heart and with passion, and I'm certainly not using any paper today, but there is an element of curiosity around that, and people often say to me, are you a born speaker, or do you have the natural confidence to be able to do it, or is it something that can be learned? And I've had this debate many times, and I actually think public speaking can be learned by practice. And I have found myself in interesting, controversial situations where perhaps I have made a statement and been quite vocal about a subject unnecessarily. And I think that has taught me how to refine what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it over the course of the last 17 years. And I find that it comes very naturally to me now, and have no sort of qualms about, picking a subject and being able to talk about it. And for anybody listening out there, I would say, whilst I have a natural aptitude for it, I would certainly say can be learnt, and it is sheer practice. And I think we're in a fantastic virtual world now where we have tools and technology that enable you to see yourself all the time in videos and learn from that if you so wish to do that.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Wonderful. And so what advice would you like to give our audience today on managing, promoting diversity and inclusion, and also on public speaking?
So there's a few bits there, Nadia, and I think that the best advice that I could give anybody coming through their career, or more broadly, is believe in yourself. Believe in your inner confidence, and don't try and be somebody else, because it comes through very quickly. Authenticity is very important to me, and I've never strayed away from my value set, from who I am, where I belong, where I've come from. And I think all of that has stood me in a great place. And I would say to you as well, don't try and become something you're not, because more often than not, I see a lot of girls in particular, with the influence of social media, portraying themselves as something that they're not. And I think that it's a sort of fallacy to get into, which can get very dangerous. And I would say that, there was a piece of advice that was given to me about 6 months ago by somebody as I was going through a sort of promotion round, if you like. And they said to me that don't give up and fight for what you believe is right, because if you don't, you will come back and be back in this every 6 months or every year. But what's important through this period is that you are resilient. And one thing that's also very important is the control of emotion. And I would say, and this is a very sort of, and I'm saying this from my heart, I think it's very, very important to control emotion in the way that you portray yourself and the way that you put yourself amongst others, because it's something that was said to me just 3 days ago, that 10% of a situation is there for you to manage. 90% of it is how you react to it.
10% of a situation is there for you to manage,
and 90% is how you react.
This is a very good advice.
And, so even as the situation that we all find ourselves in, which is very daunting, COVID-19, whether you're looking at it from a health perspective or more broadly, I think it's, lots of people, as we are seeing, being furloughed and may lose their jobs, their livelihoods. Lots of loved ones have been lost through the last 3 months. It is a time of uncertainty, and it's that inner resilience that's going to get us individually through this situation.
Wow, so much wisdom. Thank you, Nishma. Any final thoughts as time is flying and, we're nearly there? Do you have any final thoughts to share with us?
I think I've said quite a lot. I would say, if you're willing to get involved and wanting to change the dial on diversity, be it any field that you're part of, then please do reach out. I mean, I know that Nadia, you do so much work in this field as well, and I think that we are at the height of a social crisis where if there's any change that can be effected, it's got to be now. Otherwise, once again, we've lost our moment.
If there's any change, it has to be done now. So we shouldn't lose the momentum of Black Lives Matter and, bringing forward the ethnicity and equity and equality and gender agenda. We have to do something now. So Nishma, what you're telling us is if anyone can do something about it or they want to do something about it, they should reach out.
Indeed.
This is really, really awesome. I mean, so much wisdom and interesting information has been shared today. We can also only be grateful for, having you today on our Instagram Live. It's been absolutely amazing. And we want to thank you again and again and say how grateful we are. Before we part, I will announce the next speaker on Thursday, same place, same time. Gilles Acogny will be interviewing Claude Bornat from Benin, who is the head of Semesiti. It's an amazing project, and you will hear all about her story. So make sure you join us again next Thursday, same time, same place. And once more, Nishma Gosrani, thank you so much for sharing your insight, your story, your experiences, and for all the beautiful advice that you have given throughout today's interview. Everyone, stay blessed, stay safe, and we shall be with you next week again. Nishma, thank you a million times for this interview.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.